I think the evolution of speed gates, now you can sort of put them up in the gym, and you can use them not just on field, you can use them in gym settings, is really exciting, because then it allows you to chase athletic qualities both on the field and in the gym. I think that's probably one for me. Obviously GPS is, the technology is getting better and better. The quality of data, we've got longer periods of time now, longitudinal data sets that we can now compare. And I think as long as you know how to use it and what you're looking for, it can be a really important tool, particularly in the accelerated rehab, but also in rehab. You can improve those things. They're probably, I suppose, they're the things that are close to my skill set. So they're probably the two things that come to mind. And then probably just data warehouses. Like, how do you store all your data, and how do you then provide an accessible format or template, which is the big thing. So my family's background is in data engineering or data storage, and for me that's really important, is how accessible is your data, how accurate is your data, and then can you actually, because it tells a story, over time, are you able to access it at an important period of time. And there's lots of data you don't want and you don't need and you don't use, but you need to be able to get the most meaningful ones for those actionable insights. So that's probably the biggest thing that can be better, I reckon, in sport, is being able to access the meaningful data in a short period of time.
I mean, in biomechanics, we all have this love-hate affair with markers. So I think probably all of us are very, very, very keen to really see markerless motion capture actually be within the realm of our markered motion capture. That's it. We're getting close, but there's a lot of hoops we still have to jump through. And so just because of the restrictions of markering a person, that time, and the movements that we have to restrict that to, because of marker obstruction, having multiple people interacting and what that does. I think if we could move to markerless capture of our deemed validity and accuracy to our markered systems, we would be very, very excited. I think we're a lot closer, but we always think we're close, and then it's never quite there. So I see that in the near future, but if I said anything, that's probably the one. And then very close to that is this idea of being able to predict loading within, oh gosh, loading is such a hot topic word. So I better say joint torque and joint powers at the time, without actually having to have the ground reaction forces from a force plate and our markered motion capture. When we get to that from just multiple video, our next foray will be how to use all of that data rapidly. That'll be our new kind of sticking points. The rate limiting step will be, we'll have so much data, we'll have to find a way to narrow it down, which probably goes back to principal components analysis and some of the statistical techniques to reduce data. And so that'll be our new foray. But for now, probably those two things, which are intermixed, which are our markerless technologies, and understanding our joint moments or joint powers without actually having to have force plates and markers. I think we still got a ways to go, more than we'd like, but there's some, I know that we currently have some systems that we can use for particular reasons. And so that gives us a lot of promise in the future.
A lot of the technologies we use now have actually been around or were first developed decades ago, years ago. So it's unusual to see something completely new that actually comes onto the market. It's kind of just iteration of things gone previously, but certainly with the things like improvements in battery life in devices and the reduction in size of certain devices, it opens up some capacities to do things that we haven't been able to do in the past. Probably the big thing for us that is quite exciting is how well a large range of different tech is actually able to be integrated into one system. So things like inertial sensors, different types of force sensors, 3D motion capture, machine vision systems, video cameras, force plates. There's a huge amount of different data you can capture with all those devices. And if you're able to capture that from a central place with one sort of click of a button, it's hugely powerful. And if we can improve the way in which we're then able to use all that data and I guess process that data into something useful, you end up with something that's very powerful that hopefully will have minimal manual involvement from the biomechanist.
I'm really curious to see where some of the machine learning stuff does take us and some of the big data and how that can inform some of the practices that we do. It's amazing, like working with the IMUs, particularly IMeasureU when they first started, and seeing how that has advanced so significantly, and particularly after they've joined Vicon. I'd be really curious to see where they're even going to go in the future. Like internet speeds, everything, like there's been huge jumps and leaps in the last couple of years in some of the technology, some of the weight of some of the technology as well, that then has implications that you can actually use it out in the field in an applied setting. I'm really curious to see where things are going to go in the future. It's hard to say specifically, because things move so quickly in our industry that it's sometimes staying up to speed all the time. There are a couple of the ones little niche areas at the moment that I'm really curious to see how they're going to take off. And there's a lot of people that are investing a lot of time and doing some great work in that space. And I think it's just going to grow in the future. Same with, like, it's been really interesting to see how, where 3D printing started off with, and that's then had huge impacts into the ability to be able to mount cameras or, use it for prosthetics and setups from that perspective has really changed our ability to individualize a lot of setups or systems for athletes, particularly in the para space. So I'm really excited to see where things head. I'm actually not too sure where they're going to head, which is a weird thing to say, but I think it's just probably going to make some of our jobs easier, which is great. And it means that we can have a bit more of a wider impact and save a bit more time, be able to invest things more heavily into certain areas. So yeah, it'll be good.
I think, there's this trade-off between efficiency and accuracy, I think, at the moment, where there are bits of technology that can be quite efficient in terms of don't require lots of logistical effort to implement, like your IMUs and markerless technology and video analysis and all these sorts of things. But then on the flip side of it, at the moment, there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of the accuracy of what you get on the output. So there's this not in the accuracy in terms of the measure itself, but on the output. Like if we're talking clinical outputs and we're trying to get literally what the body is doing at any given sort of point in time, is that marker-based things have some challenges in terms of implementation in big scale, but the accuracy is really well defined and is easy to quantify, and all those sorts of things, is where things like IMUs are much more efficient in terms of just you put it on someone and you go and get them to do things and you can sort of get some measure. But it depends. In terms of the outputs, with what you can actually derive in that in terms of a meaningful sense, becomes a much narrower sort of spec that you can sort of chase. So at the moment, it seems like there's really kind of two ends of the spectrum, and it's about probably knowing, and people over time have tried to have their cake and eat it as well. And I think the lesson in that is, and again, it ends up being probably somewhere in between, where you've got lots of challenges logistically, but then also not necessarily the accuracy of the output. So I think over time, anything that can sort of have your cake and eat it as well, I think is going to be a massive game changer.
over the last 18 months, my role right now has a lot more research focus because we have a grant. And I mean, I love that. And like I've said, I like being on the floor of the lab, doing the data. It's like my happy space. And I know that. And probably what I've done less of is probably administration. And I've done a little less teaching. Now, I've taught consistently for the last 13 years. So it's not like I haven't done my time in teaching, and I still teach a bit. But I do like to ebb and flow. And over the last 18 months, I've been able to increase the amount of time I've spent on the floor teaching, and then doing a lot more outreach with community, a lot more outreach as far as speaking to different groups, sporting groups. And that has been great, because at the end of the day, that what we mentioned about this translation of research to practice requires someone to translate it. They're probably not going to read our papers. I hate to tell everybody, but the number of people outside of academia that read academic research is really small. So it is up to us to do public forums and to be able to speak in a language that is understandable and doesn't dumb down the research. It just literally translates that research so it can be used. And I've done more of that in the last 18 months than I probably have in a long time. Even though I would fancy that I have always done that quite well, I've done intentional amounts of that more. And it's highlighted to me how important it is, even though I already thought it was important. I don't think we do it enough. I don't think our profession does it enough. And we hold our conferences, but no one from outside of our conference group comes to our conferences. And so I guess our challenge is, do we have streams? Do we have sub-events where we do invite our partners, the community, that are actually intermixed with our conferences? And we challenge ourselves to see how good we are at actually explaining this to others. Because if it's really important, then other people will think it's important. So my role has changed to shifting towards that kind of work. And I think that that's probably what a lot of our roles should have a lot larger percentage of our time spent on.
Yeah, our roles changed a fair bit over the last 18 months, kind of a little bit intermittently though, because we've had a couple of lockdowns here in Canberra, which has meant we've had to work from home and haven't been able to really have access to athletes. But then the lockdowns elsewhere in the country, like particularly Sydney and Melbourne, have meant that we've had less athletes coming from interstate onto the AIS campus as part of a camp. So it's certainly disrupted the way we interact with athletes a fair bit over the last year. Some of the things that I think have improved over that time is actually our ability to connect with people online like this. And I think that ability to realize that you don't necessarily have to be sitting at your desk to collaborate with people or fly across the country to collaborate with people is a pretty important thing that's been a nice outcome out of this. So yeah, that would be probably the key thing for me that I've noticed, is that we can still operate reasonably normally with other practitioners, even if we're not sitting next to them. But it obviously does restrict the way we can interact with athletes and coaches a fair bit.
Well, where to start? So I have to say lockdown has forced us to think a little bit more creatively in how we provide servicing or practices. But I never thought when when it first started that I'd be trying to do biomech over Zoom and providing feedback through a Zoom platform on someone's block technique, or when you can't access gym equipment, how you then start thinking about drills in a very unique way. So I never thought we'd have athletes strapped to a discus cage in a harness trying to replicate a block setup where normally we'd be able to access a foam pit, but can't from that perspective. So it's forced us to think outside of the box a little bit more. I think it's also had us look at objective and what has impact and what is actually providing the answers that coaches and athletes needs, but also has kept us a little bit more connected than what we probably normally would be. So it's been good from that sense. I think it's been a good challenge in looking at how we actually provide effective service, but also how we can actually do things when we haven't been able to do them in person. I will not miss trying to instruct someone how to do biomechanics remotely over a Zoom platform when sometimes the internet doesn't particularly work too well. So I'm looking forward to being able to try. That's tested my patience a little bit. So I'm looking forward to being able to do that more in person. I think it's forced our coaches to become a little bit creative with lockdowns or border challenges when they haven't been able to be there in person. It's required us as biomechs or service providers to change our practices sometimes to be able to help or have impact. I know a few coaches will not miss coaching over Zoom. So I think it has looked at how we connect with our coaches remotely when they can't be in person a fair bit, or trying to instruct ideologies. We've probably been a little bit fortunate that being an outdoor sport, we have been able to look at different ways of being able to do things with the resources that we do have, whether that's, doing remote camera setups for high jump or discus setups. So it's been good from that perspective. The lockdown one has created a few challenges, but yeah, it has forced us to be creative in what we're doing. And I think there's things that will now stay in what we're doing, just because it happened by chance, not because we thought of it. It was just like, I know coaches have used some of those drills because they're actually now more effective than what they were doing before, just because they were forced to use different equipment. So it's been handy from that point of view. But yeah, I won't miss all the Teams meetings. I prefer having a conversation in person rather than 10 different Zoom platforms and then your internet drops out and then you're wandering around your house going, where's the signal going to pop up next? I tend to be being a planned person. So it has forced me out of that comfort zone of, you have a plan, next minute you're ripping it up because there's been a restriction change. So you're changing that again and off to the drawing board again. So it's been good.
So it's been challenging for us because we've had to cancel heaps of work. Like I was supposed to do consultancy, like an AFL club 2 weeks ago, had to cancel because of the couldn't get into the border. Supposed to be doing some MBA work, I was supposed to go over there in October. Can't get over there because there's too big a risk that I'll be sort of stuck over there and can't get home. So what it has meant is that it's probably fast tracked our ability to try. Like for us, it's about we're trying to use the things that we've learned and try and get them on a bigger scale. Like, so it's not just me as the central linchpin in all of these kind of return to play things with Pitch Ready. So what it has meant is that we're still doing some of these things overseas, but it's about me trying to teach them how to get the outputs that we're after and using the software components. And there's lots of things that we can do sort of remotely. And it will be an evolving sort of feast, I think. But over time, I think that'll be a good thing. It means that if I don't have to physically travel somewhere to do things, then that will make my wife much happier over time. But there is that necessity for face-to-face things, and in Australia, not all of them have the technology at their disposal. So, being able to kind of provide that means you can actually sort of capture the data, but then that also means being physically present. So when borders do open up, that will make life make life significantly easier.
One of the challenges often with research is that there's a large amount of manual handling that is often performed by somebody to get the data in a form that can be analysed or processed, and quite a lot of the time in the applied world to give coaches and athletes feedback in a fairly timely fashion. That manual handling prevents the application of that sort of research process in that space. So that's kind of one of the barriers.
Yeah, no, I think it, you certainly learn to become more adaptable. I don't think the head coach and I probably wrote that many training plans or that many versions of it, and then obviously with lockdowns and travel restrictions and borders closing and borders opening, I guess the fluency of that. So I think agile, there's all these buzzwords about periodization, but I think being adaptable or agile in your planning and your thought process is really important. So that's one. Two is then developing your training model, as we just touched upon, your own philosophy and ideologies, but having a really good training model and being able to apply that within that, because if you don't know what you're trying to do, it's very hard to be agile and adaptable. So not that I do that well all the time, but I think it's important to sort of have a philosophy around what you're trying to achieve and then being able to apply it. And then, the third one is with a loss of staff and resources is you become a jack of all trades. So I think that's really important in the sense of you might have areas, might be strength, speed and power, but one thing you learn is you've got to be a better coach at all of them. So you learn through virtue of coaching so much, and then you're dancing between being a manager and a coach. So I think for people in our industry is now the way that it's going is trying to create opportunities for you to professionally develop and formulate your own ideas, formulate your own training model, but then also be able to be better on the grass coaching, because you've got to be able to do that, and then you've got to be able to go away and manage data, manage people, and bring it all together. So that's probably the last 18 months has changed that space, and so it's exciting for people that can really grow and develop all those skills. It's also confronting because you're probably faced with there's so many situations where you're like, I feel I'm out of my comfort zone, it's a big challenge. It's a lot of hours. So they're probably the big things. And I think in that is being able to surround yourself with people that challenge you and always create, really create, I guess, robust conversations. Where am I going? Am I going in the right direction? What do I need to be better? How do I create a competitive advantage for my group? That's probably the one thing I've probably taken away from the last 18 months.